The Ocmulgee Earth Lodge and Mounds. If you drive through Macon, Georgia, it's easy to miss what sits just beyond the modern city, the Ocmulgee Mounds, a place that has seen thousands of years of human history rise, fall, and disappear beneath layers of soil and time. From the surface, it might look like a quiet park with grassy hills, but what lies beneath those mounds tells one of the oldest stories in North America. Archaeologists have traced signs of human presence here back nearly 17,000 years. That's Ice Age territory, long before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before written history. Over those millennia, the land changed hands through different cultures, each leaving something behind. But the real mystery that captures people's imagination is the Ocmulgee Earth Lodge, a structure unlike anything else in the region, preserved so well it almost feels like you've stepped into another world. When you walk down the short tunnel into the Earth Lodge, the first thing that hits you is the smell. Damp clay, faint earth, something ancient. The room opens into a circular chamber with a hard clay floor. Around the edges, there are low benches formed from packed earth. And in the center sits a raised platform shaped like a bird, a design thought to represent a falcon, an important spiritual symbol for many early native peoples. What's striking is how intact it all is. The clay floor you stand on was molded by human hands around 1,000 years ago, and the central platform still bears the impressions of wooden posts that once supported a roof. This was no ordinary hut. The Earth Lodge seems to have been a ceremonial council house, a gathering place where leaders met, rituals were held, and decisions were made for the community. Its design suggests sophisticated knowledge of engineering and acoustics. When someone speaks inside, the sound carries evenly around the circular room like a natural amplifier. It's as if the structure was built to make every voice count. Yet what truly stirs curiosity is how the people who built it vanished. The culture that lived here, often called the Mississippian civilization, flourished from around 900 to 1100 AD. They built mounds for temples, homes, and ceremonies. They traded with distant regions, crafted beautiful pottery, and developed a structured society. Then, for reasons still debated, they left. Disease, warfare, drought. Historians have theories, but no single explanation fits. The mound stood silent for centuries, reclaimed by grass and trees, until settlers arrived and began reshaping the land again. Even before archaeologists uncovered the Earth Lodge, local native stories remembered this place as sacred ground. Some Creek and Muskogee traditions speak of Ocmulgee as a site of beginnings, a place tied to migration stories and ancient ancestors. That's part of why the mounds carry such deep spiritual importance today. For many native people, visiting the Earth Lodge isn't just historical, it's a homecoming. What's fascinating is that the Ocmulgee site isn't a single moment frozen in time. It's a timeline stacked in layers. When researchers dug into the mounds, they found tools, pottery, and remnants from vastly different eras, sometimes separated by thousands of years. Beneath the Mississippian layer lie traces of earlier woodland and archaic cultures, even Paleo-Indian artifacts far below. It's like a living record of how human life evolved on this land, from nomadic hunters to organized societies. And still, some mysteries don't fit easily into the archaeological record. For instance, the alignment of the mounds has sparked debate. Some researchers note that the central mound and the Earth Lodge entrance seem oriented towards specific solar positions, possibly sunrise on the equinox or solstice. Was that intentional? Were these people astronomers in their own way, mapping the heavens with earthen structures? Others wonder if the bird-shaped platform inside the Earth Lodge hints at a deeper symbolic cosmology. In southeastern native belief systems, the falcon or bird of prey often represented the upper world, the realm of light and order. If that's true, the Earth Lodge might have symbolically connected the earth, the heavens, and the people in between, a physical meeting place between worlds. But the biggest question remains: how did they manage to preserve the Earth Lodge so well? Normally, 1,000 years of weather would erase everything. Archaeologists discovered that sometime after it was abandoned, the roof collapsed gently inward, sealing the chamber in a protective blanket of clay. The result is one of the best preserved ancient ceremonial rooms in North America, a rare time capsule. Visitors who step inside today often describe a strange feeling. The air feels still, almost heavier. The clay absorbs sound, muting your footsteps. Some say it feels spiritual, others say it feels eerie, but there's no denying the power of standing in a space that humans used a millennium ago. You can picture the fire pit glowing in the center, flickering light across painted faces, elders speaking softly, decisions shaping the future of a thriving community. Outside the Earth Lodge, the Ocmulgee mounds spread across rolling fields. The largest, known as the Great Temple Mound, rises nearly 50 ft high. From its top, you can see the Ocmulgee River winding through the landscape. The same river that once carried trade goods and ideas between distant communities. Archaeologists have found evidence of copper, shells and mica here, materials from hundreds of miles away. That means Ocmulgee wasn't isolated. It was part of a vast trade network that connected much of prehistoric America. And yet, despite decades of study, much remains unknown. Some areas of the site are still unexcavated, protected beneath the soil. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed hints of buried structures and alignments, possibly more lodges or ceremonial areas. It's as if the Earth Lodge is just one piece of a much larger design we still don't fully understand. Today, the Ocmulgee Mounds National Historical Park protects this landscape. Visitors walk boardwalks, climb the mounds, and explore a museum filled with artifacts, arrowheads, pottery, tools. But the heart of the experience is still the Earth Lodge. Standing there, surrounded by quiet, you realize you're inside something that has witnessed 1,000 years of silence, conflict, rebirth, and rediscovery. The Muscogee Creek Nation continues to visit the site, holding ceremonies and working with the park to preserve its legacy. There's a growing movement to expand the protected area and reconnect it to other ancient sites along the Ocmulgee River, creating a continuous cultural corridor. For many, it's not just about archaeology. It's about restoring a link between past and present. In a world obsessed with what's new, places like Ocmulgee remind us that deep time still breathes beneath our feet. Every stone, every grain of clay here was shaped by hands that lived and dreamed long before us. The mystery isn't only how they built these structures, it's how their spirit still lingers in them. If you ever find yourself in Macon, take a detour off the highway and walk down that narrow tunnel into the Earth Lodge. Listen closely. You might not hear voices, but you'll feel presence. The quiet hum of memory held in the walls, waiting for the next person willing to listen. The Track Rock Gap petroglyphs tucked deep in the Chattahoochee National Forest, in a quiet corner of Union County, lies one of Georgia's most mysterious places, the Track Rock Gap petroglyphs. If you don't know where to look, you could walk right past them. To most hikers, it's just another rocky slope surrounded by dense trees. But look closer, and you'll see ancient carvings etched into the soapstone. Figures, lines, and symbols that have puzzled historians and archaeologists for generations. These carvings, collectively called the Track Rock petroglyphs, cover several large boulders scattered across a small clearing near a gap between two ridges. They're thought to be between 700 and 1,000 years old, though some may date back even further. Nobody knows exactly who carved them. The Cherokee people who lived in the region for centuries told early settlers they were already there when their ancestors arrived. That single detail alone has fueled decades of debate about who created them and what they mean. When you first stand in front of the rocks, it's easy to see why they stir the imagination. The carvings vary in size and depth, some sharp and clear, others nearly worn away by time. You can make out footprints, human forms, spirals, circles, and what look like animals or masks. Some lines intersect, creating maze-like patterns that seem more symbolic than decorative. The stones themselves are dark and slick with a faint sheen when the sun hits them just right, giving the carvings a ghostly shimmer. Archaeologists generally agree that Native Americans made these carvings long before European contact, possibly as part of ritual or storytelling traditions. Similar markings appear in other parts of the southeast, but Track Rock stands out for how concentrated and varied the images are. Researchers believe the site might have been a ceremonial place or even a sacred map, a visual record of myths, journeys, or clan symbols. But that's only one side of the story. Local legends and alternative theories have added layers of mystery to the site. Some claimed the petroglyphs are evidence of contact between native peoples and an even older lost civilization. In the early 2000s, an especially bold theory emerged that the carvings were made by ancient Mayan settlers who somehow made their way from Central America into the North Georgia mountains. Proponents pointed to patterns they said resembled Mayan glyphs, arguing that Track Rock was part of an ancient Mayan outpost they called It. That idea caught public attention and even sparked a few documentaries and online debates. But archaeologists quickly pushed back, finding no evidence of Mayan artifacts or cultural traces in the area. The carvings, they argued, fit firmly within the artistic traditions of southeastern native cultures. The Mayan connection, while intriguing, was more imagination than archaeology. Still, even without lost civilizations, Track Rock Gap remains mysterious. Unlike many ancient rock art sites, no single interpretation fits. Some markings could represent clan symbols, others constellations or events. The footprint carvings, for instance, might mark spiritual journeys where ancestors stepped into the spirit world. Certain spirals could signify water, the sun, or cycles of life. What's remarkable is how many interpretations coexist, none fully proven, all deeply human. Visiting the site feels different from walking through a museum or historical park. There are no grand mounds or massive ruins, just quiet forest, birdsong, and the steady trickle of water from nearby springs. The air feels heavy with age. When you find the first carved rock, it almost feels accidental, as if you've stumbled upon something you weren't meant to see. Because the carvings are open to the elements, preservation has been a challenge. The soft soapstone erodes easily, and visitors sometimes unknowingly damage the art by touching or tracing it. The U.S. Forest Service has fenced off parts of the site to protect the stones while still allowing public access. Even so, rain, moss, and time continue to fade the carvings a little more each year. There's a quiet urgency in that, knowing that someday the details might vanish completely, leaving only photographs and sketches behind. One of the more haunting aspects of Track Rock is its setting. The gap sits in a rugged valley, surrounded by steep, forested slopes. Native people likely passed through here for generations. It's a natural corridor through the mountains. Some anthropologists think the site was a kind of crossroads, both physically and spiritually, where different groups met and shared stories. Others think it may have been a boundary marker, a place where the world of the living brushed against something deeper and older. Then there are the whispers of supernatural encounters. A few visitors have claimed to feel sudden chills or see faint lights in the trees near dusk. Others describe hearing soft tapping sounds from the stones themselves when the forest is completely still. Locals often shrug off these tales, but the atmosphere of Track Rock does something to the imagination. The forest feels alive there, as if it's quietly watching. From a scientific standpoint, researchers have used 3D scanning and digital imaging to document the carvings in incredible detail. Some newly revealed shapes were nearly invisible to the naked eye, suggesting that the visible carvings are only part of a larger, more complex composition. One analysis suggested that certain figures might align with astronomical features like the rising of specific stars or seasonal events. Whether that's intentional or coincidence is still up for debate. Today, the Track Rock Gap petroglyph site is part of the Chattahoochee National Forest Protected Heritage Areas. There's a small parking lot and a short trail that winds through the trees to the carvings. You'll find interpretive signs explaining the site's history, but the best way to experience it is in silence. Early morning or late afternoon light brings out the carvings best, when shadows settle into the grooves and the shapes seem to shift before your eyes. Standing there, surrounded by forest that hasn't changed much in 1,000 years, it's easy to imagine the people who once gathered here. Artists pressing stone tools into rock storytellers, passing on myths. Families watching fires flicker in the valley below. You get a sense that this was never meant to be decoded completely. The carvings were messages for their own time, not ours. And maybe that's what makes Track Rock Gap so powerful. It reminds us that mystery isn't always meant to be solved. Sometimes it's enough to simply stand where others once stood, to trace the edges of their world with our eyes, and to feel the quiet connection across centuries. If you ever find yourself in northern Georgia, follow the forest road until the pavement ends. Step out, breathe the mountain air, and walk down the short path into the trees. There, on a cluster of ancient stones, the voices of the past still whisper through lines and shapes carved by hands long gone. The Sapelo Island shell rings off the coast of Georgia, surrounded by salt marshes and tidal creeks, lies Sapelo Island, a place that feels frozen in time. Reaching it isn't easy. You can't just drive there. You have to take a ferry from the mainland, crossing calm, murky waters that reflect the sky like glass. As the boat drifts toward the island, the modern world starts to fade behind you. Sapelo is wild, quiet, and full of secrets. And one of its oldest mysteries lies buried in plain sight: the ancient shell rings. At first glance, they don't look like much, just subtle circular ridges rising a few feet above the ground, covered in grass and palmettos. But beneath that surface lies evidence of one of the earliest known organized communities in North America, dating back nearly 4,500 years. That's older than the pyramids of Egypt and centuries before Stonehenge was finished. These rings, built entirely from discarded oyster, clam, and mussel shells, are more than just ancient garbage piles. Archaeologists now believe they were the centers of thriving coastal villages where people lived, gathered, and celebrated life beside the sea. The mystery is not just in their age, but in their purpose, and in how such a complex society existed so long ago on a barrier island that still feels remote today. There are 3 main shell rings on Sapelo Island, each slightly different in size and shape. The largest, known as ring number 1, measures nearly 250 ft across. Imagine standing at the center, surrounded by a ring of shells, bones, and fragments of pottery rising all around you. Some sections are several feet thick, layer upon layer of material left by generations who called this place home. When excavated, archaeologists found traces of hearths, tools, and ancient food remains, all frozen in time beneath the Georgia sand. The people who built these rings belonged to what's now called the late Archaic culture, long before the rise of Mississippian mound builders. They were hunters, gatherers, and fisher folk who lived by the rhythms of the tide. What's fascinating is how advanced their organization seems to have been. The rings suggest intentional design, not random dumping. They may have built their homes around the circular formation, with the open center used for meetings or ceremonies. In other words, these rings might have been the heart of early coastal villages, a layout that reflected community, ritual, and a deep connection to the natural cycles of their world. But as with most ancient things, answers raise more questions. Why rings? Why not mounds or rows? Some researchers believe the shape symbolized harmony and unity, a reflection of how the community saw itself. Balanced, circular, endless. Others think the rings might have had astronomical or ceremonial significance, aligning with seasonal changes like the solstice. Even the materials themselves carry meaning. Oysters, abundant in the surrounding marshes, were both food and foundation. Every shell tells a story of a meal eaten, a life lived, a season passed. Over centuries, those shells accumulated into monuments to endurance. The people here were not wandering nomads. They were rooted in their environment, adapting to tides, storms, and the slow breathing of the coast. Excavations have revealed more than just shells. Deep within the layers, archaeologists found some of the earliest pottery in North America, simple, fiber-tempered vessels used for cooking and storage. That discovery changed what we thought we knew about when pottery began in this part of the world. It showed that innovation was happening here, far from the centers of early agriculture, in a community that lived by the sea. Still, the mystery of why these people eventually left Sapelo lingers. Around 3,000 years ago, the shell ring communities faded from history. The reasons aren't clear. It could have been environmental change, rising sea levels, dwindling shellfish, or altered tidal patterns. Or maybe cultural shifts drew people inland. Whatever happened, the island returned to silence. Wind and sand covered what remained, preserving those shell circles until they were rediscovered thousands of years later. In the early 1950s, archaeologists began systematically studying Sapelo's shell rings, uncovering ancient fire pits, post holes, and cooking areas. Carbon dating confirmed their incredible age, pushing back the timeline of complex human settlement along the Atlantic coast. Yet, despite decades of research, there's still no full consensus on their meaning. Some call them ceremonial centers, others think they were living spaces, or even early experiments in social planning. When you stand on one today, it's hard not to feel a quiet awe. The air hums with the sound of insects and distant surf. The smell of salt and mud fills your lungs. Everything feels ancient, even the light, soft and golden through the Spanish moss. You can imagine smoke rising from fires in the center of the ring, voices echoing, children laughing, elders telling stories as night settled over the marshes. Sapelo itself adds another layer of mystery. It's not just home to the shell rings, it's a place steeped in history and legend. The island later became a site of European colonization, plantations, and the Gulagichi culture, whose descendants still live there today. That living history overlaps with the ancient one, creating a strange continuity across millennia. People have been calling Sapelo home for as long as anyone can remember, thousands of years of resilience on a fragile strip of land. Modern visitors can reach the shell rings by guided tour or research trip, as parts of the island are restricted to protect both the archaeological sites and the fragile ecosystems. There are no grand signs or paved paths, just sandy trails leading through palmetto and oak. When you finally arrive, the rings look simple, almost humble. But knowing what they represent, the earliest evidence of structured community life in this region, gives them a quiet gravity. The Sapelo shell rings have also drawn attention from scientists studying climate and sustainability. The way these ancient people lived in balance with tidal cycles without depleting their resources offers insights for the modern world. They harvested oysters seasonally, allowed beds to replenish, and built homes in ways that didn't destroy the landscape. There's wisdom buried in those rings, lessons written not in ink but in shell. As the tide of time keeps shifting, the rings endure, slowly eroding, yes, but still there. Reminders that civilization doesn't always mean cities or stone monuments. Sometimes it's a circle of shells on a lonely island, whispering stories about humanity's earliest attempts to belong somewhere. If you ever get the chance to visit Sapelo, Step carefully on that soft, ancient ground. Feel the texture of crushed shell beneath your feet. The people who built these rings are long gone, but their presence lingers in the wind, in the salt air, and in the quiet rhythm of the tide that still shapes the island's shores. The Altamaha River, monster legend. Along the winding waters of southeastern Georgia, in the vast marshes and deep channels of the Altamaha River, people have been whispering about something strange for generations. Locals call it the Altamaha, or just Alti, a creature said to dwell beneath the murky surface, surfacing just often enough to keep the legend alive. Some say it's a remnant of the prehistoric past. Others think it's nothing more than a trick of the eye. But here, in the quiet tidewaters near Darien, Georgia, belief in Alti is as much a part of the landscape as the river itself. The legend's roots run deep. The Altamaha River flows more than 130 miles from the Ocmulgee and Oconee rivers, emptying into the Atlantic through an enormous delta of swamp and barrier islands. It's one of the least developed river systems in the eastern United States, a wild maze of cypress, reeds, and shifting channels. The area is beautiful but eerie, especially at dusk, when the water glows copper and fog rolls in off the marsh. It's easy to see how stories could take shape here. The earliest tales of the Altamaha come from the Muskogee Creek people, who spoke of a large water being inhabiting these rivers long before European settlers arrived. It was said to protect the waters and punish those who disrespected them. Early colonial accounts from the 1700s mentioned strange sightings of giant serpents in the area, often described as smooth, grey creatures with long necks and small heads. By the 1800s, the story had evolved into something even more mysterious, a river monster that could rise out of the water, slide across the surface, and vanish without a trace. Descriptions of the creature vary, but certain details come up again and again. Witnesses say Alti has a long, eel-like body, some claim up to 20 or 30 feet long, with a narrow, alligator-shaped head and flippers or fins that ripple along its sides. Its skin is usually described as grey or greenish, smooth rather than scaly, and it moves with a strange rolling motion. A few reports mention humps breaking the surface like a row of logs before the whole creature sinks silently out of sight. One of the most famous modern encounters happened in the early 1980s when a couple boating near Darien claimed they saw a massive creature just below the surface. They said it rose briefly, its head about the size of a car tire, before sliding away with surprising speed. Local newspapers ran the story, and soon more witnesses came forward. Fishermen, kayakers, even tourists. Some described hearing splashes in calm water. Others said they saw ripples when nothing was there. Skeptics, of course, have their explanations. Some believe Alti is nothing more than a misidentified manatee, which occasionally wanders into the river from the coast. Others point to giant sturgeons, ancient armor-plated fish that can grow over 10 feet long and have a habit of breaching the surface with sudden dramatic leaps. In the right light, a surfacing sturgeon could easily look like something from another age. But believers insist there's more to it. They point out that sightings often happen far upriver, well beyond where manatees or sea creatures are likely to venture. Some even claim the creature has been seen in creeks and oxbow lakes, miles from the main channel. That, they argue, suggests something that lives here year-round, a native species, perhaps something yet undiscovered. In the 1970s, a local newspaper editor named Jim Miles collected dozens of eyewitness accounts for his book on Georgia folklore. One came from a shrimp boat captain who swore he saw a serpent-like animal near St. Simon's Sound, moving faster than any fish he'd ever seen. Another report came from a group of Boy Scouts camping near the river who claimed to have seen a long-necked creature rise out of the water at dawn, its body undulating like a snake. They said it disappeared with a loud splash, leaving ripples that rocked their canoe for several minutes. The town of Darien has fully embraced its monster. You'll find murals of the Altamaha downtown, and during the annual Blessing of the Fleet Festival, people still swap new sightings over seafood and beer. The creature has become part of the local identity, equal parts folklore, fun, and mystery. There's even a roadside sign near Cathead Creek that marks the supposed heart of Alti's territory. What's intriguing is how the legend blends perfectly with the river's character. The Altamaha is slow, winding, and unpredictable. Its color shifts with the light, sometimes golden, sometimes dark green, sometimes almost black. Beneath that surface lies an entire hidden world of creatures, from massive gar to prehistoric-looking turtles. It's not hard to imagine something large moving just out of sight, stirring the reeds and setting the water rippling. Every so often, someone brings new evidence. In 2010, a blurry photo circulated online showing what looked like a serpentine shape coiling through the water. Years later, a strange carcass washed up on a Georgia beach, and locals immediately dubbed it Alti. Scientists later identified it as a decomposed shark, but that didn't stop the story from spreading. In a way, each new rumor just adds another layer to the myth. There's also something timeless about it. Every culture that's lived near the Altamaha has told some version of the same story, a guardian of the water, powerful and elusive. Whether you call it Altai, the river spirit, or just a legend, it represents the same idea, that nature still holds things beyond our understanding. If you visit the river today, especially around Darien or the nearby barrier islands, the landscape feels ancient. Spanish moss drapes from cypress trees, the air hums with insects, and the smell of brine and mud hangs thick. The water moves slowly, carrying leaves and bits of driftwood. It's easy to see why stories thrive here. The place itself feels alive, like it's watching. And if you happen to catch a glimpse of something large breaking the surface just for a second, you might find yourself wondering, was it a log? A fish, or maybe one of the oldest residents of Georgia's waterways coming up for air before slipping back into the dark. Whatever the truth is, the legend of the Altamaha has become more than a mystery. It's a reminder that even in a mapped, photographed and studied world, there are still places where imagination fills the gaps. The Altamaha River, with its shifting tides and endless depths, keeps its secrets well. So if you ever find yourself driving through Darien, stop by the water at sunset. Watch the river turn bronze and the fog creep in from the marsh. Listen to the soft splash of something unseen. Whether you believe or not, you'll feel it. The quiet thrill of knowing that some mysteries still live just beneath the surface. The Indian Springs, healing waters legend. If you drive through the small town of Flovilla, Georgia, you'll eventually come across one of the most unusual natural landmarks in the state, Indian Springs. At first glance, it looks like a simple park with a stone spring house and a slow trickle of water running through. But for hundreds of years, people have come here believing these waters can heal. What began as a sacred Native American site turned into one of Georgia's most famous natural mysteries, the Indian Springs healing waters legend. Long before settlers arrived, the Creek Nation considered this spring sacred. They called it the gift of the Great Spirit, a place of renewal and balance. The water that bubbled up from underground had a distinct smell, heavy with sulfur and a strange mineral taste. But the Creeks believed it held power. According to local stories, warriors and travelers would bathe in it to recover from wounds and sickness, sometimes staying for days in the surrounding forest until their strength returned. When European settlers began arriving in the 1700s, they noticed that the creeks guarded the spring carefully. It wasn't a place for trade or casual visits, it was treated with reverence. But as tensions grew and land was taken, the site eventually passed out of Creek hands. One man, Chief William McIntosh, who was of mixed Creek and Scottish descent, would later play a major role in that transition. McIntosh owned land near the spring and built a hotel there in the early 1800s. introducing the waters to travelers who came seeking cures. Word spread fast. By the 1820s, Indian Springs had become one of Georgia's first health resorts. Guests arrived by carriage, staying at rustic inns or boarding houses that offered healing baths in tubs filled straight from the spring. Pamphlets claimed the waters could help with skin conditions, arthritis, and even stomach problems. It was said to cure melancholy, what we might now call depression. Some doctors dismissed it as superstition, but others encouraged patients to visit. By the mid-1800s, Indian Springs was booming. Bands played on summer nights, couples strolled through the gardens, and the sulfur scent filled the air. Visitors came from across the south, believing they were taking part in something ancient, a continuation of a creek healing tradition, even if the original people had been pushed away. The irony wasn't lost on everyone. Some writers at the time commented that the healing white travelers sought might not have been entirely physical. There was a sense that they were chasing a lost connection to something spiritual that the land once held. Even today, the spring house remains the centerpiece of the park. It's a small, circular stone structure built in 1850 with a pipe where the water flows freely. Locals and tourists alike still bring empty jugs and bottles to fill. The smell hits you immediately, that sulfur, rotten egg scent, and the taste is unmistakable. It's earthy, metallic, and a little salty. Some people take a sip and swear they feel energized. Others can't get past the flavor. But every visitor seems to feel something, a quiet respect, or at least curiosity, about how a simple spring could hold centuries of stories. Scientists have studied the water for decades. They've found high levels of minerals like magnesium, calcium, and sulfur, which can have mild therapeutic effects on the skin and digestion. So, while there's no confirmed miracle cure, it's not all myth either. There's real chemistry behind the legend, just enough to keep believers coming back. But there's another layer to the mystery. Some say the spring's power doesn't just heal the body, it heals the mind. Locals tell of visitors who came during hard times, drank from the spring, and left feeling peaceful or inspired. A few even claim to have visions or dreams while sleeping nearby. One story tells of a sick woman who couldn't walk. After several days of bathing in the water and praying at the site, she stood up and walked unaided. There's no proof of her identity, but the tale has been retold in the area for over a century. Indian Springs also carries a strange sense of timelessness. It's one of the oldest state parks in the US, officially designated in 1825. But when you walk the shaded paths today, it feels like stepping back hundreds of years. Moss clings to old stone walls, and the sound of the water echoing through the springhouse creates an almost meditative rhythm. If you listen closely, you can hear birds in the trees and the faint gurgle of the spring. The same sound that drew people here long before roads, cars, or hotels existed. The surrounding area has its own legends too. Locals say the forests around Indian Springs hold healing trees, where native healers once tied bundles of herbs to the branches. Others claim to have seen orbs of light hovering near the water at dusk. Some believe these are spirits of Creek ancestors still guarding the sacred site. The state doesn't promote those stories, but ask a longtime resident and you might get a quiet nod, a hint that not everything here can be explained. Today, Indian Springs State Park is a peaceful retreat. Families picnic by the lake, campers roast marshmallows, and the old stone springhouse still draws visitors with plastic jugs in hand. The Park Museum tells the story of Chief Mackintosh, who was killed by his own people after signing the treaty that ceded Creek lands, including Indian Springs, to the US government. His old home still stands nearby, a silent reminder of how complicated that history is. Standing by the spring, it's hard not to think about the contradictions. The place that once symbolized healing also marks a deep wound in Creek history. Yet somehow, both energies coexist. The water keeps flowing, carrying minerals from deep underground, just as it has for thousands of years. People still come to drink, to reflect, or simply to feel connected to something older than themselves. Whether or not the Indian Springs waters truly heal, there's no denying their emotional effect. Visitors leave with a sense of calm, maybe because they've stepped away from noise and technology, or maybe because the land itself still holds the quiet wisdom of those who first honored it. In the end, that's the real mystery. Not the chemistry of the water or the legends of miraculous cures, but the feeling that lingers after you leave. A feeling that this small spring, hidden in the Georgia woods, still holds a secret, one that can't be bottled or tested, but only felt.